I'm delighted to welcome you all again to our latest Speakers Corner event. There are many new names and faces on this call from all over the world. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever one applies to you. I am required to let you know that we are recording this for our YouTube channel. So this will mean that this presentation and the Q&A will be available from anywhere and for all time, which is quite sobering when you sort of think about it. Many of you are members of Innovate Island and member of the community already. It's good to see you all, and some are first-time visitors. You're very welcome, but what I should do is give you a quick overview of who Innovate Island is. My name is Charlie Tuxworth, and I'm one of the co-founders. It's a collaborative network that we launched during lockdown, but actually had its roots in a whole range of coffee shop meetings that tended to fill gaps between business commitments whenever people got together in Dublin. Some of us would meet up, drink way too much coffee and swap our challenges, achievements and frustrations, usually acting as both therapy and motivation to keep going. And while startups and early stage companies had definitely had plenty of support across the island of Ireland, we quite quickly realized there was almost nowhere to turn to for those implementing innovation in established businesses, established organizations. So this eventually led to the creation of Innovate Island. And we have now become the all-island go-to community for practitioners, advocates, and explorers of innovation. We share some great content, best practice, and thought leadership, and we're representing our members at a national and international level. So before we get into today's event, just a very quick note that we've got our final members event of the year next week, which is on Thursday evening rather than Friday lunchtime. So look out for news of that on the LinkedIn group, and do bring along a glass of your favorite tipple, whatever that might be. So the business of today, we all know that innovation sits at or very close to the top of the business agenda these days, but we're still a long way short of having consensus on how that should be delivered in a professional manner. And while Ireland is making great progress on this, one country is clearly leading the way, and that country is Sweden. So I'm going to hand over now to Owen to introduce today's guest speaker. Largely because he's known Magnus for many years, but also he's much more capable than me when it comes to trying to pronounce the Swedish names. So Owen, over to you.
That's what we call a hospital pass, Charlie.
Absolutely.
But thanks very much. Yeah, I think Charlie has given us a great start today. Yeah, we did pick a topic and a subject area. We're investigating what professionalism means in innovation or innovation management. We're imagining what that could mean in Ireland for all of us, and for Innovate Island, and for us individually, and for some of the other key stakeholders in Ireland who are represented here in the session, which is great to see, the NSAI, Enterprise Ireland, and other organizations besides. So the question is, do we have maybe a model that we can consider? Do we have an exemplar? Do we have a lens to look at? And as Charlie's just indicated, well, we think the lens provided by Sweden is brilliant. And we definitely think the right man in the right place is with us today. Magnus Karlsson and I have known each other for a while, not many years, but for a while. And I first met Magnus in an ISO meeting in Stockholm. So international standards for innovation management. Magnus has been contributing centrally to those for several years now. And he and I share that experience, which is a remarkable perspective for the subject today, professionalism. But Magnus has a few other hats that he's going to explain a bit as he talks. And it's that combination of roles and perspectives that puts Magnus in a great position to share with us the experience, the story, the shape of the profession in Sweden, and then gives us the opportunity to ask of ourselves, well, what would we make of that? What would that look like for Ireland? How could Innovate Island shape and influence that as it develops, along with our partners, our collaborators, other stakeholders? What would that look like for me as a current or future innovation professional in Ireland? So that's plenty to start thinking about even before we've opened our mouths. And on that note, I would suggest over to you, Magnus. Welcome. Thanks for taking the opportunity to join us. Let's see how we get on. If I can say to everybody as Magnus starts, if you do have questions, please do put them up in chat. If you put up your hand using the Teams feature, we'll get round to you. But Magnus will give us a couple of specific opportunities to dive in and open that discussion. We really do need that discussion. That is the point of the day, as much as, if not more than, nice slides and great new friends. Over to you, Magnus.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Orin. Thank you very much, Charlie, for the invitation to talk to you here today and to really start a conversation around the profession of innovation management. And I think you have introduced the topic very well. And we do have a very good situation now, not only in Europe, but also globally, to start to talk about this profession. And you already mentioned the fact that we now have standardization work going on in this space, so we can converge our thinking and start to actually conceive that this might be a profession. So that's what we're going to discuss a little bit around here today. I'm going to share some of the experiences that we've had so far in the Swedish context, and then open up to get more perspectives from you and from all the participants here today. What is your experience? Where do you see this is going, and so on? So I see this very much as a conversation. I have a few pieces to talk about this to start us off, and then we will see where that takes us. So the exciting title that I hope has triggered you to join the meeting is Innovation, Pastime, or Profession. And that is really the situation where we're coming from. And there's a question mark there. Is there an emerging profession in this space? I do think that we're all part of an experiment. We're innovating, if you will, and we're learning as we go. What would the shape of the profession be? And as good innovators, we start by looking into what knowledge do we have? What is the challenge? What is the gap? What are the pain points? So coming back to that, I'm just going to do this. This is the most busy slide I have today. Just very quickly, the different perspectives I've had. Oin, you already mentioned, I'm positioned in the international standards work. From the perspective of Sweden, I've been taking part in that for 12, 13 years now. Standardization is a marathon. It takes time, and there are no quick fixes in standardization. So we've been at it for quite some time now. I'm also working in research in this space, connected to the Royal Institute of Technology, KTH, in Stockholm. So we're trying to learn the knowledge of innovation management, including innovation management system, and as a matter of fact, innovation management profession. We're trying to research that as we go along. I'm also part of the Practice Amplify, where we advise companies, we have training programs, and so on. Another piece that kind of goes well together with today's presentation is the fact that I'm the chairman and co-founder of, in English, it's called the Association for Innovation Management Professionals in Sweden. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. I have a background in Ericsson, where I've been working with innovation management for the global function strategy for a number of years before that. So just to set the context a little bit, that the different inroads that I have on this particular topic. More specifically here today, I'm just going to reflect a little bit, a few observations, if you will, on this topic, pastime or profession, and then open up to hear a little bit from you. Do you have the same observations? Do you have different observations, and so on? And then move over to the second part to give a few highlights, what we have done in the context of Sweden in this respect. And then again, open up for more reflections, and if there might be any next steps on this where we can collaborate and join forces and so on. So let me just start with this first little piece to kind of get the conversation going. Two observations. The first one, and you might be familiar with this one, we've used it for a while, but it kind of illustrates the fundamental issue here. So innovation is on the top of the agenda for most organizations. So it's 84% here. There are the studies, but it's up there, top one, top two, top three. We need to innovate to stay relevant. That's what we hear from companies, from organizations, and so on. The disturbing part is the second bubble here, which is that most of them are dissatisfied with their innovation performance. So even if they want it, most of them also try, they don't get it. So there is a disconnect between what we really need and what we actually could deliver in terms of innovation performance. And this is becoming more and more troubling, I would say. Right now, we're moving into big challenges that we're facing. There's sustainability, zero emission economies, digitalization, and so on. So it's not that we don't need, that we need to innovate less. On the contrary, we need to innovate more going forward. And the wish here is, can we increase the efficiency a little bit here so that we can have a little higher satisfaction rate in terms of what we invest in the innovation activities that we're doing. So this is kind of the first observation. And another part of this is, if we go back and look at actually what we have done in research for the last 20 years, we know pretty much what it takes to make effective innovation done in an organization, but we do not practice that. There is a difficulty in getting around to actually doing things in the organization that builds and really brings that knowledge into to practice. So the second observation is then, if we turn to the individuals, and this is not a new thing. There has been individuals in organization trying to do innovation and manage innovation for a very long time. However, when we, a couple of years ago, started to talk to these people and kind of build relations with them, there were a couple of things that we observed or identified. Most of them, they had to create their own job role. So they had to come up with themselves, what is it that I do when I manage innovation in my organization, my company, and so on. They are very often self-trained. They had to figure out, Google things, find management books, and so on. And they put together their own, let's say, training program and so on. They also had to fight for resources. So it's been tough for them in organizations to get the support and the resources they need to actually do the work. There's also a lack of a career path, because there's no real agreement that this is a career. Is it even a job to manage innovation in a company or in an organization? And related to that, there is no job market. If you leave one company, it's not easy just to apply for a similar job in another company, another organization, because there's no advertising for jobs available as an innovation management professionals. Come to us. That market is just not there yet. And the last observation, when we talk to these people, they're fairly lonely. Very often they write their own job description. They are the one person in that organization that is passionate about this. They want to do it. They've seen the light. They're pushing others and so on, but they are feeling fairly alone within their own organization. And sadly, many of them are frustrated. They stop doing it and they move into to do other things and so on that are kind of easier, and they don't really feel that something is moving them forward as innovation management professionals. And taken together, this becomes more pastime than profession, and we've kind of observed that in several organizations. So there is kind of room for asking the question, is there an emerging profession here? Can we bring these individuals together to build the identity of the profession? So that's really what we're talking about here. Finally, this has been done before. Every profession goes through a cycle. It starts with, it's unclear, it's ad hoc, there's a lot of frustration, and people are running around trying to get knowledge and so on, and they make up their own things, right? That's where professions start. When they gradually move up this curve, there is an increasingly level of professionalization, we could call it. And that's where there starts to be an agreed body of knowledge. This is what we need to know. This is what we're supposed to do in this profession, and so on. So that every time there is a new person coming in, they don't have to start from scratch. They can stand on the shoulders of others in the profession. There is mentorship and so on going on. And this image just shows an example of two other professions. There are many others that has been professionalized during this time frame. It's just an example. Project management went from an ad hoc and strange activity to something that is recognized and used everywhere in organizations today. And if you're a project management professionals, you don't just start by Googling some knowledge. I mean, there are courses to take, there are job descriptions, there are jobs to apply for, and you can make a career in project management, moving from a junior to a senior project manager. And the same path has been going on for quality management. So the question is really here, are we on the same path for innovation management? Will we see innovation management professionals emerge over time with the same clarity as other professions, kind of going through this going through this cycle. And one last observation on this one, it takes time to build a profession. Project management, 30 years. Quality management, 30 years. Innovation management, we don't know, but maybe we've started to move up that slope, and it's still in kind of an assumption or an hypothesis that we're testing. Can we shape this profession? Is there a role for these people in organizations that doesn't already have all kinds of other names? So that is kind of the question. So I'll just stop here and ask, do you have similar observations? And what is your thought? Are we seeing the emergence of a new profession here, or is it just something that's going to go away and then we'll do something else? I'll just stop sharing and open up for some thoughts and reflections. What are your observations?
I think Peter was the first to put his hands up. So Mr. Robbins, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks a million, and thanks, Magnus. I've been very interested in this, and I think a lot of the constituency you're talking to here are people who have had sparkling innovation careers, and a number of whom have discovered that point that you make, that there's no predefined career pathway, means that they're now in consulting, or they've sort of fallen in love with the profession and the practice, but have been unable to find a pathway. And I'm writing something with an eminent US scholar, a woman called Gina O'Connor, and she's written he's written a great book called Beyond the Champion, and she's done research around why are innovation experts or directors or heads or leads, why are they overlooked for the C-suite role of the next CEO? And we've been trying to look at sort of the sociology of professions, because everybody from garbage collectors to presidents want to make their move from being a role or an occupation to being an expert status to being a profession, because it brings with it barriers to entry and closure and protects the status and the income of the people practicing it. And what we sort of come up with, and I'm just throwing this out too, because I'm really interested in the view of the group, is generally speaking, now there's two types. There's a collegial profession, which is medicine and law and accounting. They have bodies that govern the practice. So you could be suspended or barred by the bar council, or, you know, you could be stopped from practicing by the medical council. And they also have very rigorous, continuous professional development. But the other things they have that I think we have is prolonged education and doing I've been looking at the degrees and masters, and a lot of the people on this call have been involved in developing those. So prolonged education is one status marker. Another is basically a communicable or codified body of knowledge. And I think we didn't really have that until the ISO landed, and now we do have that. We can attest to that. And then there's some kind of governing body, some institute, and it's really interesting that, as Owen and Charlie were talking about, this is a sort of this is a coalition of people who are all interested. This is an informal group, but it could become that governing body. And that's why I'm so interested in what you've been doing, because I feel in RISE, you're a few steps ahead. Not only are you a kind of an organizing body, but you're giving out formal qualifications and stuff like that. And I think maybe, so anyway, they're the main points that distinguish a profession from an occupation. But when we've been talking to editors about this, they're saying, well, of course, innovation people want to see themselves as a profession. And of course we do. But they're saying the real questions are, what are the HR people saying? And what are the CEOs saying? And what's the likelihood of us being the next CEO of Tesla? Well, maybe Tesla is an innovator at the top, but what's the likelihood of the innovation people? Because her research basically showed the innovation people, although they're in charge of the smartest people in the company and the biggest bets of the company, still, when the big job comes up, because they haven't had P&L responsibility for EMEA or for Japan, or for a product line or something, they're generally overlooked. And her research showed that they will generally go and take the same role in another company 3 years later, sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of wasted talent. So anyway, that's I'm really interested to see
Brilliant,
what
Peter.
people think of that.
Thank you. Magnus.
A lot of great comments, and I could pick up on a lot of things here. Great work done by Gina O'Connor, and the book. It's in the chat now. Just one other thing, you talked about the education training programs and so on, and we do actually see a lot of students taking master programs. There are PhD coming out, and they're in innovation management and so on. So I do think that we have a fairly well covered in terms of let's say programs for students and so on. But it turns out towards the end of the training, they ask themselves, okay, can I get a job? Can I do this? And the advice is sometimes don't do it, because just pick a more traditional career, if you will, because we have this unclarity. So we're missing a lot of talents already there. They're not moving into this space because they don't see the progression, and they don't really see the, let's say, the forerunners and the role models that we need to put up there. So they are choosing other careers. So again, if we could be a little bit more clear on what this career path is, we could also make these young talents a path for them. Another thing is that we need to distinguish a little bit about innovation management professionals and all the other people that are engaged in innovation and are innovators and so on. So we're talking more about the people that are facilitating that innovation is happening, to making sure that all the other smart people and innovators in a company or an organization actually can have an easier road towards creating value for users, customers, and so on. We're coming back to that
Magnus,
a little bit.
If I can just suggest in terms of Magnus,
yes.
I can just suggest in terms of timing, we take two very quick comments and then we'll get back into the flow of the presentation. Is that okay by you?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, Brian, 30-second version. You're on mute, Brian.
Sorry, Owen. Excellent so far. Great. When I looked at that, I thought this man has seen my career. This is the way it goes down to this. So yeah, this whole business where you have to create your own environment and you have to create your own structures within your organization is I think absolutely happens in all other organizations when I talk to people this. The problem is then you create your own environment that you don't want to leave, or if you go somewhere else, you have to recreate it again. So I absolutely think we have these pockets of people doing the same thing, and it will become a profession when we all get together and it's either the standards or whatever comes in part. I think we're there. We're at a tipping point. I think we're at a tipping point. So yep, fully agree with everything you said so far. Excellent.
Is there anybody else who wants? There were some hands up, but it looks like they've gone down. Magnus, you want to take up that point, or are you happy to dive back in?
Let's see if there's any more comments, and then I'll just pick up on Brian's point. Just a few more quick ones. Yeah, go ahead.
There's a comment from Francis Mitchell in the chat. Do you see innovation as more owned by marketing or R&D? What profile of person tends to end up in innovation?
Good question. I think we can have both of those paths. So it could be marketing, R&D, technology. So I don't think that it sits typically or very strictly in one or the other. So I think we should be fairly flexible. At least at this point, we don't have any evidence that one is better than the other.
Okay, and we've got one more comment. John, will you forgive me if we go back to Magnus after one comment? Thanks, John. Derek, you have the floor.
Yeah, just the relationship about the question about roles. I think one of the things that definitely stands in the way of innovation as a standalone career is the expectation that it's everybody's job. That that companies, I think, are unwilling to separate out innovation roles from, as you described, marketing, in manufacturing. The expectation is that each of those needs to innovate within their own space, and separating it out as somebody else's job in the past for some roles hasn't been the best path. Focusing expertise in one person as opposed to training to a lower level most staff. So that's, I think, would be a challenge against this sort of been developing maybe along the same path as project management or lean experts and roles like that.
Thanks, Derek. Magnus, do you want to pick up on that or dive in?
But yeah, I could keep going and then just pick up on that while I'm doing that. Is that okay?
Please.
because that is a good point. I mean, how many professionals do we need in innovation in a company? Shouldn't everyone be an innovator? I think it's similar to, let's say, project managers. Not everybody's managing projects, but everybody could be part of projects. So the project manager or the innovation manager are responsible for just pulling it all together, leading the way, finding the path, and so on. And we don't need everybody to be experts in that, but we need a few in any organization. If we don't have them, we should have them for hire. So that's a little bit how we have been kind of dealing with that aspect. So indeed, everybody in an organization should contribute to the innovation efforts, or could potentially do so. But a few people need to be out there to lead the way. And let me explain a little bit how we were thinking in the Swedish context when we set this up. So based on the fact that these people are out there, but they don't really come together, there was no real community where these people could meet and so on. We started a couple of years ago, this was 2013, to create the first professional community in Sweden for these individuals. It's called the Association for Innovation Management Professionals in Sweden, Innovationsledarna, if you will, in Swedish. And this was really key, because everything when it comes to build profession starts with the community. It's not about some other person, some smart professor or consultant dictating this is what the profession is about. It's built bottom up by the community. So we started by getting them all together and then just asking them, okay, where do you want to go? What is it that you do? What kind of support do you need, and so on? What are your pains and what are your gains when you're trying to pursue these activities in your organizations? So we just kind of put these words out there, and the people that felt that, yeah, that's me, that's what I'm trying to do, they were welcome to join this association. And we really got two things going for us here when it comes to making innovation work in a better way in all kinds of organizations. We already mentioned that. We do have now international standard just since 1 or 2 years ago that we just actually got the first international standards by ISO being published in this space. I'm talking specifically about ISO 56000, ISO 56002 that describes the innovation management system. And that is really a framework that we could use as a baseline. And as was already mentioned, this becomes the core of let's say, the body of knowledge. This is something that we could use as a starting point and all agree upon. So that is an enabler for building the profession. So built on that, we just started to think about, okay, and we knew a couple of years ago that this was going on. We've been part of working with standardization and so on. We started to think about what is the how do we define it? What is an innovation management professional? And the association came up with this type of definition. It's a person that is responsible for or actively contributing to leading and organizing. These are the key words: lead and organize of innovation efforts, and to increase or build innovation capabilities in an organization or for an organization, if you have more like an advisory consulting role and so on. So it's about building capabilities which are more longer lasting in an organization, but it could also be to just lead a project or kind of finding their way forward for a team of innovators or people that have great ideas, great insights, or something like that. But it's about the leading and organizing that is the key. That's the way we were thinking about this profession. So certainly not everyone in an organization should be an innovation management professional, but there should be a few. So the next question we asked, okay, what is part of such a professional model? And Peter, you already mentioned that there should be the body of knowledge, the job description, that could be certification. So these are kind of elements of a professional model, if you will. And we started out to build the job description, the body of knowledge, and indeed also the personal certification grounded in the association and by the members. So we started to ask them, then the first question was, what do you do? And that then was kind of worked into the job description. And then, what did you read that was really helpful for you in practicing that job? And that became the body of knowledge. And then finally, we used the body of knowledge as a building or kind of platform for personal certification, because we asked everybody, would it help if there was a personal certification that you could acquire as a professional and to actually promote what you're doing in your organization. And most people said, yeah, let's try that. So we kind of started on that path as well. So these are the kind of the 3 building blocks of the professional model that we have put in place and been used now for, and it has been in use now for quite some time. You see, there's an empty space here. I'm coming back to that. There might be one more missing thing here that I'd like to discuss, but I'm coming back to that. Just very quickly, the job description, it's available on the website. It talks about 6 main areas. So if you have this job, you're a part of developing innovation strategies, designing innovation processes, making sure that there are tools and methods in place. You might be very hands-on in planning, executing, and coaching the initiatives, the projects. You might facilitate collaboration internally or externally with other parties and so on. And you might want to work more on the kind of culture side to promote that culture for innovation, maybe through training, awareness, and so on. So most of the people have had one or several of these things on their job description. And we've used this, and we've published it, and there are a description under each of them. And then people could take this to their employer and say, look, my job actually exists, it's here. And they could use this as an input or inspiration for creating the job description that they have in that unique specific situation. So this is not set in stone. Everybody doesn't have to have all this in their job description, but it's more like a toolbox to pick and choose the things that you would like to have as part of a job description. So this has helped both the people having the job and the organizations that would like to hire a person that have this job. Because before this, nobody really knew what are they doing, what are they good for, what should I ask for? So that has helped a lot of clarify and kind of build the core of the profession. Second piece, body of knowledge. Again, we asked everybody, what did you read that was helpful? That was the simple question, and we just put together. And now we're in the second version of the body of knowledge, which is now the 1.0, and it includes the standards. It includes 2 of the standards, the international standards, 56,000 and 56,002. And then a lot of additional stuff that people found really useful that in most cases amplify or gives more examples to what is actually in the standards. So this is developed by the community and for the community, if you will. So again, the association is behind that. And this is, let's say, the beginning or the embryo on body of knowledge that do exist in other professions. This is for project management, for example. The last piece is the personal certification, and that's really answering the question, okay, if I've had this job for a while, I have the knowledge and so on, but how can I kind of improve that? How can I use that to kind of leverage and become more advanced or get more advanced tasks and so on? So we put this in place. This is not done by only the association, because we needed like a neutral certification body to do this. So we talked to RISE. That's the Research Institutes of Sweden. They are supposed to be at the forefront of what's happening within innovation in Sweden. So also in the area of personal certification of innovation management professionals, they provided, let's say, the infrastructure to do the personal certification, also according to another standard, so that it's transparent. There is a division of who is running the process and who has the content. To do this, you need 3 years of relevant work experience, and there is also kind of an examination connected to this. So we wanted to set the bar quite high. But again, this is something to aspire for. So if you start in this profession, you can say, okay, in a few years' time, I can have my personal certification if I just keep on doing what I'm doing right now. So that gives some clarity on what could be next for me as a junior professional, for example. Just very briefly, a little bit more of a technical image here showing the different roles. You have the personal certification program leading to the certificate up in the right-hand corner. And that is then executed by 2 players. It's the association, Innovationsledarna. They are providing the content in the form of the body of knowledge. And then there is RISE, the certification body on the right-hand side, that provides the process and the certificates and so on. So they have all the infrastructure, and they do other personal certifications as well. On the left-hand side, there are optional training programs. Just putting this in here to show you that training is kind of detached or separated from personal certification. So these are two independent things. You can take training, or actually you can do the personal certification without taking a specific training program. We would like to have many training providers. This is the way it works. There is an application, there's an examination, the written test. You have to show your work experience in form of a small case, and then there's an oral examination, and then there is the final decision to get the personal certification. This is the main process for all personal certification being done. And why are we doing this? Again, it's about the strengthening the profession. It is the kind of the beginning of establishing a job market. It's the employability for the individual, but it's also the assurance for the employer. They could ask for, okay, I'd like to have a professional, and preferably they should have personal certification, because then I know that that person has a certain number of years of experience, have been doing these things, and so on. So again, it brings more clarity to identify the core of the profession. Here's one example. This is the public hospital, Karolinska University Hospital in Stockholm. They formally decided to implement the management system standard. And they also said that we're going to have 10 certified innovation management professionals to up the status of the profession so that they can work more effectively, and they will be listened to in that organization. And that we also have some research going on to find out what is the status. If you have that certificate, can you work and become more effectively? And the initial, let's say, findings from that research is yes. Just my final comment before we just end this is, what would be that missing piece? Maybe we do need a competence framework where we actually outline what are the competencies needed that then the body of knowledge should fulfill. And that competence framework could also potentially take this to more of an international level. So I just throw that out as a question. Should we join forces and maybe work on a new standards item where we build or outline that competence framework that kind of outlines the competences needed to become an innovation management professional? Maybe we're not ready to do that yet. I do think that we're coming close to that point, because I do agree with what was said before, that we are at this tipping point. I'll just throw in a couple of links also for you to look at. I'll send this out so that you can take a look at this, if you will. These are the resources that I've been talking about, and also link to an article that looks at certification that's coming up in the Journal of Innovation Management. So that's the end of my second part. Let's open up. We can't hear you, Owen.
Yeah, when you press the button,
yeah.
You really have to press the button. That's the lesson. So thank you again, Magnus. Very good. And I know you're talking really fast to give us a huge amount of information in a short period of time, and we do want a few minutes for discussion. There are a couple of people who want to ask a question, but I'm going to just start by quickly looking at some comments. I know Charlie is saying he agrees with your point about where we were, that most people just were told, make us better, make us more innovative. I know Catherine was saying, well, yeah, but people are never, the organizations are never going to buy into this unless they figure out what innovation needs for themselves first. Where do you start with? Start with why. It sort of echoes Simon Sinek, for example. Derek has another comment about a conflict between creative nature innovation and striving to cage innovation management under constraining standards. Oh, Derek, I'd love to have a go at that one. That would be great for a pint or a coffee. We won't get it done in 5 minutes though. And Brian is commending us. Very well done for the presentation and the structure of that. Thank you for that, Magnus. And I think I would echo that comment. Right, with that done, let me just turn to those people who have their hands up. And I believe Francis is first on this occasion.
Thanks very much. It was just in relation to the comment on the competency model that you mentioned, Magnus. So I joined Teleflex just in August, actually, in an innovation role, and it's all about rolling out innovation processes within the organisation. It's a medical devices company, and I'm also heavily involved in the Irish MedTech Association, which is a branch of IBEC. And I know from those guys that they have done a variety of competency models in different areas, like in R&D and things like that, that have been hugely successful. Because when you're here in Teleflex, you want to know the type of people who are going to make it successful. They all really know that there's definitely a type of person that works in innovation and definitely a type of person that doesn't. We all know that. But having something like a good solid competency model, I think could only benefit. And it was actually something I was thinking about just the other day, that I would love to find one for innovation, because it would be very helpful, because it's that type of person approach that really matters in terms of success for these projects, I think, and building the right teams to deliver on innovation projects. Everyone wants to be working on innovation, but not everyone is the right person to be working on it. So if there is something in the pipeline on that, I think we'd definitely be interested.
It's a very good point. Let's talk about that more, because I fully agree with you on that comment. Thank you.
Okay, and our next commenter is Alan Doherty.
Hiya, yeah, thanks very much. That was extremely interesting. Just as kind of food for thought, I'd love to just throw it out there. So a concept that I came across recently around professionalism is an American author called Mike Monteiro, who is a UX design guru. And he has a similar kind of an approach to professionalism of UX design, for example, for things like social media and some of the apps that we all have on our phones and in our houses. And a dimension that he is very passionate about is ethics. And he said, well, you know, we've got doctors and lawyers, and they take very serious oaths, and you know, there's the Hippocratic oath of do no harm. And he's very keen to kind of promote this aspect. And you know, I understand that it might not necessarily seem like the most obvious thing, but you know, when you've got the body of knowledge and when you've got all these different things in there, perhaps there is maybe not a sanction, but potentially sort of a code of conduct or some sort of a set of standards that you adhere to, not the ISO standards, but, you know, ethical standards along the lines of, you know, if you are in a position of influence as an innovator, that you don't, you know, innovate and speed up processes which are, you know, polluting, or you don't come up with innovative ways to circumvent regulations, and that you act within a certain framework. Just thought it was an interesting one. It was new to me, the Hippocratic Oath for innovators. I don't know what it would look like. But it's a thought starter when we're having this conversation. I'll just love to put it in the mix and see if anyone has a response to that.
It is indeed, Alan, and it's notable that David, an engineer, is claiming the higher moral ground for engineers. I'm sure among others, David, isn't that right?
No, just engineers.
Yeah. No. Thanks for that. Okay, the next person with their hands up is Charlie.
Yeah, it's been really useful, Magnus, and reinforces my view as well that we need to professionalize this as an industry. What I think potentially is a challenge across Ireland, North and South, is that we are a nation of SMEs, and having people going through an academic route to potentially to become an innovation professional, to go into organizations that aren't big enough to warrant having an innovation professional in there. So I think it's an interesting dilemma we've got there, and I'm not convinced, some people on the call will hate me for this, I'm not convinced that academic routes are necessarily the right way. I used to be in the software industry, and the best people we recruited were straight from school. We trained them, they were interns, they were, oh God, what's the term? They're completely gone from my mind. They learned on the job as they went on. God, I don't know why the word's gone. So they learned on the job. So I think there's a big job. Apprentices, thank you, Francis. God, that's such a simple word. So I think there's work to be done in schools to stop drumming out 98% of the creativity that is in children before they hit the age of 18. And there's work to be done in existing businesses to accept people coming in to challenge the way that they operate. So this is a massively important part of this, but it's obviously got to be part of a bigger change in the way that we all operate. So that's my top new words. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Charlie. I'm going to suggest one more comment from the floor, so to speak. While we're doing that, Magnus, have a quick look at the most recent comments on the thread. It's really cool. And then I'll ask you to come back with your last comment of the day. And after that, if you'll excuse us and if you're all still awake, there'll be a little bit of declaration of intent from Innovate Island. Then we'll be pretty close to the end of the hour. So Shane, you are that last comment from the floor. Welcome.
Thanks, Owen, and thanks, Magnus. I'm going to go right back to your very first slide, where you were talking about the extent to which people agree with the need to innovate to stay relevant. And it strikes me that that's a sort of a fundamentally reactive position. And I'm wondering if that's a key part of why dissatisfaction scores with innovation are so high. because it comes from that, oh God, I've got to do this now, and I'm already behind.
Thanks for that, Shane. Magnus, that's a lot to absorb quickly from.
Yeah, yeah, yes. And I don't know that we don't have much time, but just quickly to your point, Shane. Yes, staying relevant implies catching up. It could equally be that move forwards and make everybody else irrelevant. So so that could be a more proactive take on it. And I wouldn't read too much into those percentages and so on that particular study, because there could be so many explanations why it is like that. I do think in reality we have this gap that people are they're throwing resources at something that they think are the renewal, or catching up or moving ahead of others, but they are not getting as much as they are expecting. So it's kind of, they're underestimating what it takes to get innovation done, if you will. It's kind of okay, let's have some fun Friday and so on. This is not a fun Friday thing. This is something that should be at the core of your organization, and you should treat it as a mission critical activity. And you can't do that if it's not defined in some way, or if you not put your kind of effort to it in a more systematic and structured way. Two more comments. Charlie, to your point on academics, we discussed this a lot, and we actually, for the personal certification, we did not put any requirements for academic training or education in there. So we said we recognize that you could come from any walks of life and moving into this area. But we do think there are certain skills, certain competencies you need to be able to perform well. That's why we put up this kind of the empty space on the competence framework. So let's think more jointly around that. How could we fill that space? And of course, we could do it in Sweden, but I think more interesting would be to have more an international kind of collaboration on that, so that we could get more inputs from many perspectives, many countries, and so on. And finally, to the comment about standards putting the constraint on innovation activities. I do appreciate that comment. We do hear it a lot, and there might be such a risk, but I'd like just to invite you to think of this in a different way. It's about removing constraints. We talk about standards, and this profession is there to create the enablers for an organization to be able to innovate more effectively. And very often that means removing barriers. So it's about removing barriers in a systematic and conscious way. Because now, as we saw on this first slide, they're trying to innovate, but they can't get the job done. Very often it's about barriers they have in their organization that they cannot see. With innovation management professionals, with the standards that are the enablers, we can get more visibility on that, and we can remove or avoid those barriers in a smarter way. So that's how I see the standard. That's why I work with the kind of the standards and the profession, because there must be a smarter way to actually move forward and create value for the resources we put in. And that's really the quest here. We need to produce more value for the resources we put into renewal and innovation efforts, and because we cannot afford to do it otherwise. So that's why we need to move forward on this. So just to round it off, thank you very much again for the invitation. And I do see that we might have more to talk about, how to progress this further. I'd love to see more collaboration between our two associations, and we'd like to stimulate others to create similar communities that we can connect with and hook up with, so that we can broaden this conversation. So thank you so much. Back to you, Owen. Charlie.
You're very good, Magnus. A great chat, lovely thinking. The chat itself is fantastic. We're going to preserve that as best we can. We have taken a video. We'll see about what's the best way to use that, share that without offending people's sensibilities. And we are not done with this subject. So if you will, please, I know we missed out on John Murphy getting this question in. Are you okay, John? Will you forgive us, or do you want your last speak now?
So I actually just came along and put it into the chat, and it was actually the slide that you put up at the first break, actually, where you showed the different, as I say, flavors of change. And it was called PMM, it was called Six Sigma, it was Lean, Continuous Improvement. I mean, you name it, actually. It's all, the basic thing actually is the need for companies to change, and it actually requires change management as the skill. And the thing is like that, there's like lots of lovely buzzwords out there. And I mean, sometimes you need to go actually to the simple part of actually saying, this is change management under any other name.
Fully agree with that. A very important topic, and let's discuss more at a given time in the future. So
on that point, let's discuss more. This is brilliant as a topic, and it's brilliant as a framework for Innovate Island. It's brilliant as a framework for the emerging innovation management profession in the island of Ireland. So we're not done with this. But the declaration of intent from us, I think it has to be a little bit more specific than that. The first thing is Innovate Island, this is our mission. You know, we are there to share and to drive professionalism in the island of Ireland. We are there to develop routes, paths, platforms, tools. We have engaged with the Swedish Association because they're ahead of us, because there's a model, but we're also working with Enterprise Ireland, who is here in the room, National Standards Authority of Ireland. TC45 is the name of the committee that works in innovation management standards. I'm going to ask Sean, if he's still with us, to give us a 30-second version of his perspective of what might happen in Ireland in the next little while. But at this moment, we can already say Innovate Island has already started to work on a lot of the aspects that Magnus has presented on. We've already used the body of knowledge. We've already used the job description that our Swedish compatriots have developed. And we're working on developing the Irish body of knowledge and feeding that back with our partners across Europe. There's an international organization, several of them, ISPIN being one. So we can immediately see some umbrellas where we can see competence frameworks or international bodies of knowledge being represented. You can see how this could develop. We are working, by the way, with Enterprise Ireland on an ISO forum for innovation consultants. We're working with people in the NSAI on making some of the things that Magnus described in Sweden happen now, and I'm going to ask Sean to speak about that. And we are working on our program of events to make sure that we're constantly updating, sharing best knowledge and best practice with our members, and making sure that our membership is growing, that the profession is growing, that innovation in Ireland is in a stronger and stronger place. That's what we're here for, and we are working on that now. We'd love you to help us, join the conversation. Right, I think in broad terms, all we can say is we will be coming back to this in New Year. We can say immediately the next Innovate Island event is next Thursday, 5 p.m. And there's a post up in the Innovate Island LinkedIn group describing that. It's intended as good fun, bit of networking, bit of chat, and getting to know each other a little bit better. Charlie, is there any last piece you'd like to add in terms of reflection on the hour or practicalities that we've missed out on today?
No, other than the massive thank you to Magnus. It was extremely thought-provoking, really insightful, and an excellent model for us to refer to as we move forward. So thank you very much indeed. Brilliant, folks. I think we give you back your lunch hour or 4 minutes of it. Did you want to get Sean to contribute 30 seconds or no?
It's okay, Owen. I'll put something up on LinkedIn just to inform you a little bit about certification. So don't worry, I'll put it on LinkedIn, Owen. I'm not offended.
Don't be. Thank you very much, Sean.
No problem.
I didn't forget you, Sean.
Thank you, Charlie. That's okay. Magnus, that was superb as usual. And but I will be promoting a little bit about that certification and the training behind the certification. But let me post that up on LinkedIn and share it with everybody.
Thank you, Sean.
Good job. Well done, Magnus.
See you all again.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. And the video will be online soon. So look out for that coming if you want to review. All right. Cheers. Thanks very much indeed.
Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
Thank you very much. Take care.